Now, let me introduce our second speaker, who comes from California, but he lives in Prague, where he's organizing Agile Prague conference. Thus, he's the same enthusiast as you are. I have to say, I'm really looking forward to the speech because he's going to tell us on how to save a ton of money. I think that all of us would like to know this, and specifically by not making the wrong things for the wrong reasons. Please use Slido for the questions. We're going to get back to them at the end of the presentation. And now let's dive in together to the talk, Who's the User in Your User Stories, by one and only Fred Williams. Friend, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Is it working? Good morning. Like they said, I'm Fred Williams. I'm originally from California, ale bydlím v Praze, tak mluvím čeština, ale nemluvím slovinština. As Lewis said, I'm kind of mean. Oh, I get applause. I'm a little bit mean, a little bit skeptical about things. The talk that I'm most well known for is how to sabotage Agile, all the things to do wrong, all the pitfalls that you're going to encounter. And I kind of come from a outsider viewpoint in that I'm not a software developer, I'm not a coder. I've been working in IT for 30 years in various roles, QA, documentation, project management, project leadership, product ownership, and I'm a certified product owner and all that. What I'm going to talk about today is who the users really are. And the reason this can save money is because I kind of contradict what the McKinsey consultants are selling, because McKinsey is a bunch of liars and they have a long criminal history of lying. Yeah, look it up. But they're going around telling everyone that Scrum and Agile is going to make it faster and better and cheaper, and that's completely wrong. Agile is not faster. It's not necessarily better, and it's certainly not cheaper. Well, the truth is that things still cost the same amount of money to make products, if not even more and more money over time. So how am I going to save any money on this? Well, the sole advantage of Agile, from my perspective, is it helps you avoid making things that nobody's going to use. I'll say that again. The sole value is in avoiding making things that nobody wants to use, or that nobody wants to support, or that you can't make money off of, right? Because if you understand the product requirements early, you can identify, hey, this thing isn't going to work. It's not actually giving value. Sure, we could make this and it'll be on budget, it'll be on time, and it'll have good quality, but as Luis says, nobody's going to use it. So you've wasted your time. And something like 60% of all software ever made is never used at all. Yeah, how many of you have made something that nobody ended up using? Yeah, it should be every hand in the room, because even if you don't know it, it happened. Yeah. So what I'm proposing is that we need to have a little bit bigger perspective on user stories. Maybe even user is the word that we need to get rid of, because there's some serious problems with user stories. As you can see, I'm a very minimalist on my slides here. I don't have pretty pictures and animations for you. Sorry. Well, what's wrong in the first place? The user story is the fundamental building block of Agile. If you're not doing the user story right, everything else is going to be wrong. Well, the fundamental problem is that it's written in the first person, right? It's saying, me, here's what I want. Well, this would be great if the users themselves were writing these stories, but they don't. In fact, most of the time we don't even talk to the users enough to know what they really want. Instead, what we're saying is, if I, with a master's degree in computer science, were to be this user, Bill the construction guy, then I would do it this way because I have a master's degree in computer science, right? So there's the first problem. You're supposed to write it in the first person so that you can have empathy for what they're feeling, but that doesn't work. That really doesn't work, because we're always going to revert back to, well, as me, the computer scientist, right? So there's the first problem. Some other problems are, and you've all seen this, doing agile user stories for everything so that you get ridiculous nonsense like, as a Microsoft server, I want to send files to, what? What? You're missing the important people and decision makers who are going to give you information that you really need. And if you're not focusing on those people, then instead you're focusing on the technology, right? And then you're right back to Agile again, or excuse me, to waterfall again. And personally, after 30 years in this business, I've never seen a purely waterfall organization. I don't think they exist. Every organization has a mix of waterfall and Agile. Every waterfall organization, even back in the old days in the 90s, they would still use Agile processes within their teams. And every organization today that claims they're Agile, they're still using waterfall methodologies for their budgeting and their scheduling and their product vision and their quarterly reports, and that's life, okay? No such thing as pure agility, no such thing as pure waterfall. The question is rather, how much agility are you able to implement, and how much waterfall do you need to put up with? So, I'm not the first person who said, hey, there's some problems with user stories. So others have proposed that you always use the invest definition to make sure that your stories are independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable, which I agree with. Yeah, that's really useful. But it doesn't go far enough. And then Ron Jeffries, another guy that I meet up with at conferences like this, he said, well, actually, okay, the user story starts on a card, and that generates a conversation that generates the confirmation. In other words, the test of, are you actually done? Is this going to be accepted by the customer, and so forth. And I kind of like the idea of having a card and putting the emphasis on the conversation, but it still gets written down at a certain point, at which point words have that funny effect of seeming permanent and important when they're just words, and we could change them, but then people are afraid to. And even though somebody wrote the story and they put a word in there without even thinking about it, it becomes the holy grail to have that one word be the thing that we're achieving and delivering, and then it turns out that word wasn't even that important because you didn't have enough conversations. So this is all important. I suppose what I would like to do is get a little bit bigger picture, because what we're missing is the reality of the world we're living in, especially today. It's finally hitting home. There's layoffs across the IT industry. The fat days are over, my friends, right? We've been pretty pampered, pretty protected, high demand. You can always get another job. This might be going away for a variety of reasons: economical, technical, sociological. And saying that we're just user-centric and we just care about our customers and nothing else is, as Luis would say, bullshit. That's not how companies work. The companies work today, and this will not be something you want to hear necessarily, but once you hear it, you're going to be like, I'm afraid Fred's right, is the enshittification life cycle. Anybody heard of enshittification yet? I see one head nodding. Okay, well, I'm glad to introduce you to it. It's Cory Doctorow, who you may have heard of, came up with the term, and he's at pluralistic.net. I would strongly recommend reading that. What he talks about is how companies start out, and we'll use Amazon as the example. In the beginning, they're very customer-focused, very user-centric. They want to give the customers everything, right? And they will spend an enormous amount of money incurring a loss for years, even decades. Remember, Amazon didn't make any money for a long, long time because instead they were putting that excess and the profits and the value into the hands of their customers. Remember that? Well then, once they kind of locked the customers in, and Prime is a great tool for them doing that, and get the customers sort of locked in, move to the second stage of the enshittification cycle. And this is where the business partners get the excess value, right? We start giving great deals to all the sellers who are going to put your stuff on Amazon and you'll reach billions of customers and you'll save all this money and your marketing will cost and you'll be in the world's biggest marketplace. And it was a great deal for businesses, right? And a lot of people moved their businesses onto Amazon, became Amazon-only sellers, in fact. So that was the second stage of the cycle. Get those business users locked in, right? So now we've got first stage users, second stage business users. And once they're locked in through strategies like, for example, at Amazon, they have a most favored nation clause in their sellers' contracts where the sellers cannot offer a lower price anyplace else than they have at Amazon, right? So that means that you're not really getting a better bargain anyplace else. You're locked in. And if you go off of Amazon, well, you've lost all of your customers. So you have no choice but to sign. And once you got that lock in, comes the third stage. And this is where capitalism really starts devouring things. It's when the company now has locked in users, locked in sellers, and the excess value can all be reaped by the company, its executives, and its investors. Yeah? And that's where we are now with Amazon. It's where we are now with Facebook. It's where we are now with Google. They've all followed this exact same cycle. So now if you're in the early stage startup, this idea of agility and focusing on the users and being customer-centric makes a lot of sense because the idea is grow, 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 get as many users as possible. But let's say if you're in the third stage of the enshittification cycle, well, that customer focus, you may feel successful, but you're not going to get rewarded for it because that's not what the company is valuing at that time in the cycle. So the ABCs kind of defines the actual priorities. And these priorities shift over time. And if you don't shift with them, you don't understand the underlying strategic value that they're trying to unlock. To understand this better, consider the levels of detail, right? Because we talked earlier about how user stories aren't really capturing the correct level of detail, or they're capturing too much detail. At the highest level of detail, you've got the theme. And this is the company's, basically the elevator pitch for the company. What does your company do? Oh, we sell oil. Or we provide a platform for buyers and sellers. Or we provide a platform for grandmothers to show off their grandsons and their families. Or we provide a place where kids can be easily entertained by clicking endless short videos. Whatever it is that your theme. An initiative is something that's big enough that they're going to invest money, time, and attention into it. Typically between 6 months and 5 years. It's not a short-term thing, it's a longer-term thing. There may be a complete division devoted to it. So for example, an initiative from Amazon would be the creation of Amazon Prime, right? An initiative from Facebook would be adding, what's that Facebook-owned video communication thing, FaceTime? Yeah, Facebook Messenger. And these would be initiatives, okay? An epic is a big picture of a feature, right? So within Amazon Prime, you would have the feature of signing up, right? Or subscription renewal, or things like this. And these are chunks of functionality that are supporting the initiative. And then the stories themselves are the small features that you're implementing within a sprint. Now, unfortunately, all of the emphasis so far has been down here on the last stage, right? We rarely get comprehensive or understandable epics stated in a story form. We almost never get initiatives stated in a story form. But that, in fact, is where the stories matter the most. Down at the small level of detail, if you're forcing yourself to write as a Microsoft server, I want to send files, you're doing it wrong, because that's where you can get back into a waterfall statement of the system shall do this, especially if it's nothing unusual or innovative, it's just a standard functionality that already exists. Don't waste your time writing a user story for small bits. Just put it in a task in Jira or however you're going to do it on the team. Where the stories really matter is on the epics and the initiatives, to understand why are we doing this? Because a lot of teams are working on stuff and they know all about the what and the how, but they understand very little about the who and almost nothing about the why. Whereas the who and the why are actually the most important questions to ask and answer. So there's actually 3 major types of users. And they're not users. So I would like to get away from that word of user stories and talk instead about actor stories, business stories, and company stories. Because you have different protagonists, you have different desires, and you'd have different values at each of those levels. And if you ignore any of these 3, you're going to run into trouble. As Luis says, you're not going to have the support of the CEO and the CFO because you're not talking about the company and how they're going to get paid, how executives are going to get paid, and how investors are going to get paid. Similarly, if you're writing a business story, but you treat a business partner exactly the same as a customer in your user stories, you're going to miss the real motivations that they're looking for. So a minimal viable story is art with 3 T's, where you put the person doing it, assuming you have personas, and I suggest give them a name. Makes it a lot easier and more understandable. Instead of saying, as a blah blah, I'm going to do this, rather say, Richard, and here we've got his persona, and we know what his requirements are, and what his environment is, and what results he wants. So name them explicitly, and include them in your planning. And then you want to make sure that you don't put any solutions in here. The story is about the problem and the result. Who wants what? And why? Why? For the test, which should be written at the same time as the user stories, you need a minimum of 3 tests. The first is, okay, why is it valuable to Anthony? The second is, why is it valuable to Brittany, the business partner, the one who's paying to use the software? Because in today's world, Anthony probably isn't paying anything. It looks like a free service to Anthony. Yeah? But Brittany has to pay if she wants her advertisement placed up at the top of the results, if she wants to have a geographical area where the users from a geographical area are the ones who are seeing her results. She's paying for that based on the information you've collected so that she can get Anthony as a customer, obviously. The one we always forget, and in many ways the most important, is good old Chauncey, the CEO, the CFO, the one sitting in the boardroom making these decisions. And you know what? They don't care about Anthony's mortgage. They don't care about Brittany's business. They care about their business. They care about making sure that the private equity company that came in and invested in the company is going to get the return they're expecting, because that's who they're working for. They're not working for Anthony and Brittany. Chauncey wants to make sure that he is eventually able to extract that value from Anthony and Brittany. If that means serving them well, okay, Anthony and Brittany get served well. If it means doing some unethical things to ensure that we got stuff that Anthony and Brittany didn't want to give us, Chauncey will do it. And that's his real motivation. You got to understand that to know what company you're actually working at. So the first thing you're going to need are some personas. And they're not so difficult. You'll see if you Google user personas, you'll see that it's got extremely nice graphics, and you've got a whole bunch of information, their dog's name, their favorite form of dog food, all these irrelevant things. But actually, all you need is a little picture. You can draw your own. You can go to this person does not exist. Some basic demographic information. Chauncey, he's 58, he has an MBA, and he's the CEO, right? So that's how we start off, the demographics. That's the deer. The next is, what is his environment? Right? Both the physical environment and the technical environment that he's operating in. Well, we don't want to talk about every possible environment, but rather, where is he most likely to encounter the information we're providing to him? And he's going to be in his CEO's suite. He's probably got a high-end Windows machine and an iPhone. What's acceptable to him? This is a tricky one because people talk about what results does he want, or what does he like, what does he hate, what is absolutely not acceptable, and so forth. I'd make it easier for you. Make a list of comparisons. Because in the real world, we don't say, oh, I love chocolate cake and nothing but chocolate cake. If you like chocolate cake, you probably also like chocolate candies, you probably also like chocolate drinks, maybe coffee with some chocolate mixed in, and so forth. And your goal in eating chocolate is to have it be at least as good as other chocolates you've had, and maybe better, right? There's no absolute chocolatousness. So it's going to be coming in the form of something than X, right? So when Chauncey says, I want the system to be fast, the typical engineer, kind of a smart ass, is going to answer, what does fast mean? Right? And what Chauncey really means is, I want it to be at least as fast as getting a Google result, or faster than making a phone call, right? You don't have to be the best in the world, you just have to be slightly better than your competitors. So have a list of just a few acceptance criteria. And for Chauncey, it's probably going to be, we'll earn more than our rivals. That's what he's really looking for. It's going to cost less than our rivals, or we're going to be faster to market than our rivals. To put these into absolute terms You first need that comparison, because otherwise you're comparing an infinite to the real. So let's keep it real with our acceptance criteria. Most important of all is results. What are the results Chauncey wants, right? Well, the real results he wants is he wants to be on the cover of Forbes. As Louis said, one of their big metrics or one of their success criterion was they got a lot of attention in the press, right? What does Chauncey really want? He wants credibility. He wants to please the investors. And like most of us, he wants to keep his job. This is the purpose of this. You don't need more than this. We don't need to know Chauncey's dog name or his kids or anything like that. We have to understand the basic stuff of what motivates Chauncey. And this should be at the highest level of user stories, because if you make Chauncey mad, your project's done. Your job is done, because they have the power to hire and fire. So, where did I put that clicker? Here it is. So what this helps you with, by understanding more than just the user stories, because as you can see already, that's not enough. Luis confirmed it. You've got to understand the politics and motivations behind the decisions, yeah? You've got to understand the underlying goals of each narrative story. When it gets down to the Anthony wants to get a mortgage, right? You have to understand why Chauncey wants to provide this service. Yeah? If you don't understand that, Chauncey's going to kill your project. We have to define how the value gets harvested, right? And again, in the enshittification life cycle, which you can observe more and more places these days, the value is harvested at first by the end users, by the Anthonys of the world, second by the Britneys, the business partners of the company, and third is when they collect their cash, being patient all those years, is when it's coming to the company itself, their executives and investors. Don't develop stuff where you don't know who's harvesting the value. Yeah? Because if nobody is harvesting the value, it's one of those orphan pieces of functionality that no one's going to use. Don't make it. If you can't get answers to these questions, don't make it. Don't put it on your Kanban board. Don't put it in your backlog, because you don't really understand how you're going to be judged on this. And in the real world, this is going to improve your metrics, your ability to measure what matters, as they say. So if you're measuring what matters, and it's time to market and profit and customer satisfaction, all these things, but you're missing the most important thing, which is Chauncey wants to get on the cover of Forbes magazine, right? You're not measuring what matters to the decision makers. As I said, it's a little bit skeptical, maybe a little bit cynical, but I think that a lot of you recognize that this is how the world is actually working today, and I'd rather give you that assistance rather than giving you a happy story of how Agile solves everything, because it doesn't. It's just a way to help us avoid making stuff that nobody wants. There's the question always with this then, all right, how does that translate into actually knowing what I should prioritize? If we're prioritizing by value, now we've got so many competing values. Well, I've got a very flexible equation for you. And that's A, B, C over E. where the A, the B, and the C are the actor, the person who physically touches the keyboard, clicks the mouse, you're Anthony. The business or buyer could be the same person, but often today it's not. Brittany, the person who's actually buying the ads from us. And then you've got C, the company. In this case, we've got Chauncey as their representative. And let's say you've got, feature 1, feature 2, feature 3, and feature 4. What you can do is, with these competing features, you can ask your representative of Anthony, hopefully your product owner is very close to Anthony and knows something about Anthony. You can ask them, how would they value this? Again, never as an absolute. There's no such thing as an absolute most valuable, always valuable. No, it's always in comparison to other things. So you've got these features, and you can ask Anthony, okay, let's rate these on a scale of 1 to 7. Which of these 4 do you put first? How valuable is it to you? And and Richard or Anthony says, well, this one's a 2, this one's like a 5, this one's a 0, and this one's a 7. Right? For your 4 different features there. And then you go to Brittany, the person who pays for the ads, actually gives you money directly. Which feature is most valuable to her? And she'll probably tell you, oh, I love this one not so much, this one's okay, and well, I kind of like this one too. And then you can go to Chauncey and say, which ones are you going to value the most based on his priorities of paying back the investors or growing customers or pleasing businesses, depending on where they are in the enshittification life cycle. And he might say, oh, this one, and I like this one best, and not a fan of that one, and this one's kind of okay, right? And now you go to your developers, the people who have to actually make this. And I could put in a D here for delay. I just don't know how to do the mathematics on that because I'm kind of stupid. So to make it complete, you could add a D in there. But for this, we're just calling it effort, okay? Make it a simple thing where, again, it's in comparison to the other things on the list, not an absolute value. And this one is going to be reverse the order for where 1 is the least amount of effort and 7 is maximum effort. Right, and so he could put, your team could say, oh, this one will be easy, this one's super hard, this one, and this one not so difficult either, right? And then you could just do very simple math here, and you say, okay, so this is 6 over 2, that equals a 3. This one's a 14 over a 1, that equals 14. There's a 7 over a 7, that equals 1. And this is 14 over 4. What's that? Something between 3 and 2, right? Let's call it 2.5. Right, and you can see, oh, here's our winner. Right, here's our winner. But this is my flexible formula. So in the real world, where are you in the enshittification life cycle? Do you double all these numbers because you're really focused on growth at any cost? Do you focus on this because now it's starting to grow your revenue and lock in business users? Or are you already in the stage where it's just gimme that money? And you could, give triple points to this, you could weight this, you could have different scales, you could use Fibonacci numbers, you can get as fancy as you want in this mathematics and as complicated as you want, but this is the calculation we all do in our heads anyways. So what I'm trying to bring out here is I'm not innovating here. I'm not telling you anything new. It's just what I've been observing over 30 years. I'm telling you what I've seen. Same with the sabotage stuff. Not recommending that you sabotage things. I'm just saying that this is how it actually works in the real world. And it'll be helpful to you in understanding what you're building and why you're building it if you take this into account. Okay. So, yeah, I think we may have skipped some slides. Yeah. Here we go. So, where are you in the initiatification life cycle is going to determine how you're going to use this flexible schedule formula. And again, resist the urge to give a solution in your user story. Yeah? The people writing user stories, product owners in the room, raise your hands, product owners. Yeah? When you write the user stories, don't give a solution. Just say who wants what, and then explain why. What are their motivations? You know, hook it back up to their description where you can see their acceptance criteria, what they want this to be better than, or worse than, or more money than. Yeah? Include those in your acceptance test. Write acceptance tests not just for the end user, but for all three of these people, and attach it to the user story. The test of the user story is probably more valuable than the user story itself, because the test is finally where you can say, okay, this is what I need to do. And don't write user stories for the smallest level of details. It's a waste of everyone's time. If it's actually just a solution implementation because, oh yeah, we've done this 6 times before, we know exactly how to do it, we just say, here's the things we've got to complete in this sprint, don't write those as a user story. But rather understand the higher level reasons of why it's important to do this. And always provide the test of value. I don't know what my time is here, can you? I've got 5 minutes left? Really? I've been talking a long time, you guys. Okay. So it depends on your place. Sorry, I went back. Flexible. Defining how value gets harvested. Here's your minimal viable. Okay, so minimal viable story is, again, just the actor, result, test, test, test. Understand what the real business is. The real business Chauncey is in is selling ads and then selling information. Yeah? These are the 3 people that you want to put into your user stories. They do different things. Again, the actor is what we would traditionally call the end user, actually physically interacting with it. I might keep on going the wrong way here. Yes, exactly. Have a separate story for Chauncey. We're going to get to questions here. Okay, here's my final slide. And if you don't know where to start, I'm going to give you these questions. This is what you should take pictures of. These questions will save you so much aggravation because they're very, very simple, and you can find out if someone's bullshitting you if they're unable to answer these. Right? And that is, who's going to use this? Where are they physically? What equipment are they using? And when? What's the trigger? Yeah? Because Anthony's not looking for a mortgage when he's in high school. He's looking soon after he gets married, right? These are the sorts of triggers that you can describe. And then answer why. Why does Anthony want to do this? Is there something wrong? What is his problem? Yeah, his problem is he thinks he wants to buy a house, doesn't know how much money he needs. What's wonderful? Well, he can go online, he can use Brittany's little calculator and find out, all right, here's how much I have to have for the down payment, here's what my monthly mortgage payments would be, maybe even get pre-approved. And that would be wonderful. And then what's weird? Is there something weird about this situation? Do we have to integrate with some COBOL backend with the banks? Do we need to do something that is non-standard? something that would be surprising to Richard, something that would be surprising to the team. Get into those details. Don't gloss over that, because that's the important information. So use these 3 questions. Or you can say, no, there's nothing wrong. There's not a problem. We just want to add this extra feature that'll give him this wonderful thing. And, oh, it's not weird. It's just standard. So you can answer these in the negative, right? But if there's nothing wrong and there's nothing wonderful and there's nothing weird, well, don't make that thing. That's how you get the advantage of Agile, is by not making stuff. So, parting thoughts. AI is neither artificial nor intelligent. We all know that. This is a statistical methodology with large corpus that identifies patterns. It's pattern seeking based on former statistical analysis. But should we use AI as an additional persona? Because more and more people are working in such a way that they are training AIs, or, and I've experienced this myself in a recent company, people are working to please the AI. The AI sets the parameters under which they are performing their jobs. Yeah? Much like old-fashioned Taylorism, here's a stopwatch, you've got 60 seconds to assemble this part. Now it's the AI doing that. So, do we need to start including AIs in our persona as well? Understanding that if it doesn't meet the requirements of the AI, it'll be automatically rejected and will never get in front of anybody's eyeballs. Or do we give AI goals? And will we be working for the AI, or is AI working for us? So if you want to contact me, have more conversations, I'll be here through the rest of the day and tonight. I'm even spending the day in Košice tomorrow, so if somebody wants to meet for breakfast or lunch. I'm Fred. I really like talking with people. I like hearing new ideas. And I don't know if I've exhausted all of my time or if there's time for a quick question. We have a coffee break after this.
Yes, thank you very much, Fred. I think that deserves a big applause. That was a very, very nice presentation and interesting. Before we get to the questions, I left there like 5 minutes for questions. Just 2 comments. I like really that there is not absolute chocolatiness, but also there is never too much chocolate, I think, for chocolate lovers. And the other thing that this reminds me also, like, for example, tidying up my apartment, that like, who wants what and why? Well, me as a mother wants to tidy up to live like a human, right? So I can use the process of Agile also at home by tidying up my apartment. Okay, do we have any questions for Fred? I think that these are still Luis's questions, so...
Oh, great, more time for coffee.
We can give it like 1 or 2. There was a question right here about...
Everybody's
about the
just
persona,
in shock.
right?
How did he say those things? I've never heard that before. What?
Maybe I saved some.
Oh.
But, yeah, I saved some. You told, you were speaking about the fact that, okay, I have an idea, but really I cannot answer the questions, right? So I don't know who is the user. That means that my idea is not going to be successful, but I strongly believe it is. I really want to do it. Is there any chance for further step, how to move forward?
Okay, so Ray Bradbury, you know the science fiction writer Ray Bradbury? Anybody? Somebody have heard that? I was lucky when I was a teenager, I got to sit and talk with Ray Bradbury for a couple of hours. And he said, I'm going to give you some advice, young man. He said, listen to the experts. The experts will tell you that you're wrong when you have your great idea. And you know what? They're probably going to be right. But if you still believe in that really strongly in your idea, go for it anyways. And you know what? 90%, 95%, you're going to fail because the experts were right. But if you get that little chance and you are successful and beyond your wildest dreams and you were right, well, don't hesitate to go back and find those people who told you that you were wrong. And if they don't apologize, rub it in. So if you really passionately believe that, oh, this thing I've made is going to change the world, I don't know who's going to use it, who's going to pay for it, but this is a really cool thing and I'm going to change everything with it, go for it. But you'll probably fail. It's better to start off with, I noticed that my mom always has a problem cleaning up all those damn toys from the kids. She wants to live like a human. I wonder if there's some way that I could give the access to the kids, because they're the real users of the toy, and simultaneously give real value to Livia, because she's going to be the buyer of whatever this thing is that I'm making, that would also be valuable to somebody like Chauncey to actually invest in, and that he can see a way that we could expand this and get enough market share to actually make it a viable company as well, right? So maybe you start off focusing on Anthony, who wants to play with his wooden blocks, but don't neglect Livia and Chauncey, because without them, you've got a hobby or maybe a charity, but you don't have a business. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Perfect. There is one question in Slido. How often would you suggest revisiting and adapting the personas based on feedback from reality?
That's a very good question. Thank you. Yeah, because a lot of times the personas are not based on reality. They're just made up. It's better if you've got more reality. And as time goes on, reality has a way of kicking you in the face and getting your attention. And that's a wonderful thing. Retire personas that aren't working anymore. Don't update them, retire them. If you find out that that persona is not actually working for you, retire them. And this should be an ongoing process. As soon as you start realizing, hey, Brittany's really not our primary customer anymore. It's more like Bobby is doing more buying and is more valuable to us. Yeah? So let Brittany retire and introduce Bobby to your group. But again, don't put too much focus on having the perfect personas. Put more focus on where's the value. What result do they want in the real world outside the system? Nobody uses software for the sake of using software except for us. And we are not the customer. So make sure that you state values in terms that have meaning in the world outside that software. And revisit these frequently. These should be living documents. That's why I like the idea of the Ron Jeffries of this ongoing conversations. So by the time a user story or a business story or a company story makes it into your backlog, the top of your backlog, you should already have those at least 3 tests of value decided and a very good understanding of what it is these people actually want, because they don't all want the same thing.
Fred, thank you very much for your presentation, for answers, for the questions. I hope that you're staying for the panel discussion as well.
I hope so.
So you're going to have a chance to ask Fred again what is interesting for you. So thank you very much, Fred.
Coffee time.